Hello and welcome to episode 178 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we got to talk about Major 4. The final major in the 2025 Call of Duty League season is in the books, and we have another repeat champion. And we also really need to talk about two very important retirements in the Call of Duty esports space. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Doing all right. Obviously, as I said on the preview show, I didn't get to watch as much as the major as I would have hoped because I was at my cousin's wedding, hence this paraphernalia that I'm wearing right now. And I thought it would be funny to just wear it at the start of the show. I'm definitely not wearing it for the whole show. But shout out my cousin Austin and Kirsten, the newest Bink. But yeah, a lot of stuff went down this weekend, and I'm excited to talk all about it. And then, like you said, a couple retirements already coming in that we obviously got to show some love and break down too. So should be a good one.
Congrats on the marriage. Obviously, for anybody just listening but not watching, Bink has a hat on that says the Binks with an airplane next to the, and he also had heart-shaped sunglasses with the Binks on the lenses. So um, I didn't know I didn't know people gave out merch at their weddings, but maybe I need to go to
Neither did
more
I.
Binkowski weddings. And Bink told me that one of the non
Yeah,
Binkowski cousins is a challer. He listens to the Ego Chall.
yeah. So shout out Max and Carter. They're my cousin Austin, his cousins on the other side of his family. Was talking to them the night before the wedding and whatnot. Big Optic fans, and they said they
Never
listen
mind
to the
then.
pod. So shout out those guys. Thanks for the support. And all things considered for Optic, at least we'll talk about them later. But pretty good weekend for them, especially in the grand scheme of things and in comparison to some of their earlier events this year.
Yeah, they had actually something to be happy about for once this season at a major. So yeah, we might talk about them. Obviously, uh, Bink and I were just talking about it before we went on the air, but we have like 8 or 9 shows until Champs because Champs is a month from yesterday from when we're recording this. It starts on June 26th. So a lot of shows, a lot of time before we get to Champs. So we do need to probably space it out, and we have so much to talk about today that unless we were planning on like a 2.5 hour show, we probably do need to break it out into multiple shows to even complete this major. But before we actually talk about the tournament itself, we need to talk about things that came outside of this tournament. The first of which is iLLeY announcing on the 23rd that he is retiring. He posted on Twitter, said, "I know this post is long overdue, but I appreciate everyone that has supported me throughout my career. With that being said, I've officially retired from competitive Call of Duty. Just wanted to say I'm thankful for everyone I met during this journey and the experiences that came with it. From winning champs my first year to winning a chip for my dream org, not enough could be said how truly grateful I am for everything. With that being said, this is not the end, but the start of a new beginning." And we were just talking about iLLeY maybe a week or two ago about what he could possibly uh, where he could possibly be in terms of a team next season. You suggested, and I thought it was a good idea, of if Envy is committed to returning to competitive Call of Duty, he would make a lot of sense in that. But of course, with this retirement, that does not seem to be the case. It seems like iLLeY will not be competing, uh, you know, moving forward. Your first thoughts? I think you were in the midst of a wedding or a wedding weekend at this point. So what did you think when you saw that iLLeY retired?
Yeah, I kind of ironic timing, I guess, just because, like you said, we were just talking about him either an episode or 2 episodes ago. But regardless, we were talking about when we were talking about the best S&D player argument and whatnot. So he came up then in a couple episodes actually. So um, that end of the day, like iLLeY retiring, he's got a world championship. He'll always be in the history books for that, and I think no matter where you stand in the debate of greatest S&D players of all time, he's got to be a name that's at least mentioned, if not towards the top of that list for many people. Um, so congrats on the career. Obviously, some unfortunate occurrences that kind of, led towards this being the end probably sooner than some people would have expected. But nonetheless, I do think it's interesting. I mean, if iLLeY was retiring a couple of years ago, um, we could say he'd pretty much instantly become like, could just stream S&D tournaments and whatnot and be an instant success, kind of like Havoc, but obviously, um, Havoc doesn't have or isn't doing the S&D stuff. He just does the ranked and Warzone, as far as I know. But obviously, Havoc was, we've talked about it before. I liked watching Havoc do like his 1v1 GBs and stuff in early mornings um. And I could see iLLeY doing something like that if that's the direction he goes in. I mean, he's a pretty funny guy. Would just be interested to see what the content would look like out of him. Um, he could also, if a team wants to give him a chance, I could see him being like an S&D coach or I don't think he would be like a solo coach or a head coach for a team, but I could see him doing some S&D coaching if the opportunity arose. So congrats on the career to iLLeY. Obviously, we'll love to see him play even longer just because of the talent he exhibited in a short amount of time. But yeah, we'll be interested to see where he goes from here because, like you said, I forgot the exact wording there at the end of his tweet, but he said like it's not the end or whatever, and he's got some stuff coming up. So who knows? Maybe that return to Envy or whatever is as a content creator, streamer. I could definitely see that. I guess technically you could even go back to Optic as a content creator or streamer. So a lot of possibilities for him. We'll have to keep an eye out for what's next.
I would say that it was a weird career for iLLeY. Of course, the end is probably going to be remembered like
Yeah.
quite a bit now, just because that was the last time that we saw him. And of course, if people don't know what we're talking about, I think we should just say like he was, people were worried about like whether he was abusing Adderall or some kind of, performance enhancing drug for at least Call of Duty. We wouldn't necessarily think about that in like, traditional sports, even though I do think it is technically a PED in some of those other sports. I think baseball you'd probably want to be like that could be something you could do. But certainly in esports, it's a big deal, Call of Duty especially. And since that is the last time, he hasn't played in over a year now. The last time he played was with the Seattle Surge. And I think that's going to be remembered. But he shouldn't just be remembered for that. I think that's a part of his story, but not the entire story. The fact that he won champs in his rookie year, that he was a part of that. I mean, he won the very first Call of Duty League championship with the Dallas Empire, that being his rookie year. He was, like you said, one of, if not the greatest S&D player. I know Crim6, was it? Or no, it was Slasher that said that he is the best and not iLLeY, but I think iLLeY has as good of an argument as anybody in terms of that. iLLeY also, before the, I guess it came into the CWL, was the age limit, the 18-year-old. You had to be 18 to compete, I believe. I think that was the CWL. Maybe that was a little bit before that. But either way, like, he kind of got screwed by that, as did several other players, where if there was no age requirement, I believe before that, it was like 13. You had to be, I think, 13 or 14 to compete at one of those MLG events. Either way, like, he would have been on a pro team well before his 18th birthday if he was allowed to. The same with Shotzi, same with Hook, same with Kenny. A lot of those guys that Temp as well, like, they just never really got the opportunity until they were 18. And by that time, like, you can say primes are different, right? Like some like professional athletes, their prime, I guess traditionally you think of like 26 to 30, something along those lines, like in football or basketball, where you're kind of already physically matured and you have the experience, and now like it's all about putting it all together. Whereas in esports, obviously the age is completely warped to around like 18 to like 23, right? Because I mean, we'll talk about it later, but Attach was the oldest or second oldest player in the league, and he's not even 30 years old. So that kind of gives you an idea of how weird the ages in esports can be. And I think iLLeY, his prime probably would have been like 16 years old to like 21, which is still like a really great 5-year run, but he did not get to enjoy most of that because he was prohibited from competing in these official events. And I think also what we need to talk about, or just at least mention, is that thumb injury that he suffered. I
Yep,
believe that was in Cold War, maybe
Vanguard.
Vanguard, where he had like, I forget exactly, like maybe a cyst on his thumb, and it made it very painful for him to play. Optic were very competitive that year, and basically he didn't play for a month or two. At least, like I know they brought in ProLoot and they tried to figure out ways to kind of fill the gap. And then he came back at the end of the season. And it just didn't seem like he was himself. That the team was not themselves either, and I think that could have, that it certainly did cost him at least a chance at really adding to his legacy and competing for more championships. And who knows how the rest of his career goes from there. But yeah, I wanted to say that at least, that his career is just very odd because it is from the very beginning affected by the CWL or CDL rules, and then injuries and this latest Adderall thing at the end. So I have a hard time kind of looking at his legacy like in totality, and I think maybe as time kind of passes and we get a little more time between like what he ended with, and like we're able to actually see, okay, this is exactly what iLLeY was in the context of Call of Duty history. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, because it is, I think it's a complicated topic, because well, we don't know everything, of course we don't know
Yeah.
much about it, um, and I think that's part of it. Like if we knew more about it, I think we could have a better or a more solid opinion on where he fits into the Call of Duty legacy.
Yeah, I mean, I know it feels like their names are connected now almost anytime we talk about either of them. But first name that comes to mind for me is someone like John.
Hmm.
John winning champs MVP when he won with Envy and Black Ops 3 there. Like, he was at a time, like, you know, several years ago at this point now, he was considered one of the best SMG players in competitive Call of Duty. Like,
Yeah,
Scump, John, and Apathy were pretty much like the names, like, you know, majorly thrown around a lot. Obviously, Zuma could be given a shout there too. Trying to think of just some other names at the top of my head, but like really the point being that, like, John was considered, like, I mean, you could probably even say like a better player than iLLeY at iLLeY's height
yeah,
and
for
John's
sure.
height comparatively. And nowadays, like, nobody really talks about John because John went through, allegedly a similar uh, situation potentially, and then he kind of had like a very short return in the CDL era, and it didn't go well for him, and he's kind of just like, we're talking about retirements. He's effectively retired without actually announcing it. Maybe he did, and I don't remember, but I don't know if he even ever actually retired. Um, so yeah, and I mean, um, just based on the timing of when this is happening in comparison to, like, a real sports world example too. um the whole Pete Rose situation now after his passing, where Major League Baseball commissioner basically like deciding that, like, um play baseball players who were banned or punished or whatever while they were living, those bans are going to expire upon their death moving forward, and starting
Hmm.
with, I believe, like the Black Sox scandals from the early 1900s, and Pete Rose now. um so it's like, this, you talk about comparing sports and esports and all that stuff, like, it's not totally unique to esports that something like this happens. Obviously, those are two very different examples, but in that sense, like, with Pete Rose, especially for me, someone who I didn't get to watch him, but you hear about how good he was and stuff. That could be a similar thing for iLLeY, in the sense of some of the newer fans, or fans who come in the next couple of years, like, they don't see iLLeY play because he's retired, but then, like, maybe he does the content stuff and the streaming stuff, and he builds his name up in that regard, and then you're able to look back and be like, yeah, this guy was just gross. And obviously, the people who got to watch him do his thing at his prime, and especially in SND, they can tell you it. But um, it's just it's one of those things where you know a lot of people go through these situations, and they you know some people would even dream to have the chance to play like 1 year of professional Call of Duty, or do anything at the level that iLLeY did, let alone win events, win a world championship, etc. And to just have that like sort of diluted, or you know surrounded in this controversy to any extent is just not what you want to happen. But it is the way it is, and time will tell now just exactly where he goes from here. And I think that'll be because sort of comparing him to John again, like he could kind of just take that route and we don't really hear from him moving forward. But I do think just how talented he is, and especially if there's some of those S&D tournaments that still do exist to an extent, he could stream those and people would watch him play. So it'll be interesting to see what path he goes down. But um, yeah, I just think I don't think this is totally uh, the end for iLLeY. I could definitely see him going in multiple different directions here. It's just a question of what he does.
One last thing on the John connection, because I I know we've talked about it and I can't remember the exact specifics about it, but the first champs in 2013, I believe John, if I'm not mistaken, technically qualified, or his team qualified, and he was 16, I want to say at the time, and it was like between. I know that John and Scump were like the
Yeah.
two players where it was like, should they be able to compete? Because I think the first champs had like a 17-year-old requirement, maybe 18. I don't feel like Scump was 18 at the time, but I could be wrong on that. But I know John was not. I just looked it up, and like I think champs was in like March 2013, and he was born in March 96. So he was at most 17 at the time. I don't think he was. I think that was the thing, is like he wasn't
Yeah.
17, and he wasn't able to compete. And like I said with iLLeY, I think there could be a lot of similarities drawn to that as well, because and I did see people bring this up on Twitter about like, should the CDL have an age requirement anymore, or should the age requirement be lowered? This is something that obviously professional sports have dealt with. The NBA used to let players come in directly from high school. LeBron James being a great example. I think Andrew Bynum is the youngest player in NBA history, and he was like 18 years old in like 6 days or something like that. And obviously, the current status quo for the CDL and COD esports, because it even extends into challengers as well, is you have to be 18 years old to compete in these official events. I would say that there is a good reason why you have that, right? You don't want, I'm sure part of it is like a gambling aspect, I would imagine, because that was kind of the argument for why game battles, for example, couldn't be, or wagers, excuse me, couldn't be played in like Connecticut, where you're from. Like for a long time, it was barred. And there's also the idea of like, we want these literal children who are 13, 14, 15 years old to maybe focus on things other than competing in Call of Duty events. I would argue that as long as they're able to do their schoolwork and able to focus on those things, and they certainly should, that comes first, they should be able to compete. I don't see the real reason why you would have a limit, like an arbitrary limit of like, okay, this kid is 17 years old and he's 17 and a half. So he's not able to compete in half a year when he's 18, when he's probably little to no different than he is right now. He will be able to compete in these events. I don't really kind of understand that point of view. And I think it has really done harm to some of these players who could have certainly benefited financially from this, and probably could have helped their families and helped themselves, by being able to play earlier. I kind of want to get your thoughts on, should the CDL or whatever version of Call of Duty esports comes after this, should that age requirement stay in place where you do have to be 18 years old to play?
As far as I know, at least the original, like, I don't know if it was the announcement or what, but like at least the rumbling at the time of the age limit implementation was had to do with like the rating of Call of Duty being M for mature. And I think that's technically 17. So then, like, you draw the lines there. Why would it be the age limit be 18 instead of 17? I don't really remember exactly everything that happened at that time. And similar to what you were saying with, the Scump and John situation at Champs, like I know that was a thing. Aches talked about it when he was doing one of his like history lesson streams, like less than a month ago or around that time when he was doing his streams. Um, and like I knew it was a thing, but I don't know all the details around it. But regardless, I do think, like from a legal standpoint, as long as like that's the actual reasoning behind the 18 age restriction being like the rating of the Call of Duty itself or whatever, as long as that's like somewhat a factor, I don't see that changing. If we do move to like an open system away from the CDL in the future and Activision, Microsoft aren't involved, maybe that would be the path towards um an age limit or whatever not being a part of Pro Call of Duty, because then like Activision wouldn't be like legally responsible for stuff like that. Again, I don't know all the details around it and whatnot, but yeah, long story short, I don't see that changing anytime soon, unless like you said, like it would have to be a major shake up to the foundation and system of COD esports itself. And I don't know if that's happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think it changes. I think one, the CDL and challengers have not been known to be the most like fan friendly or player friendly in the past. I don't think that they necessarily make these macro decisions uh and like think about the players or have the players in mind a lot of these times. So it probably won't change. I do think that it is a conversation that should be had, and a player like iLLeY, a player like John, they should be kind of at the center of it, like and thinking about what happened to their careers, not like in a negative way or anything, but like could it have been better? Could we have uh, created greater stories with them competing when they were younger than 18? And think about like someone like Nifty, who his career
Yeah.
would like his biggest moments in his career, at least his Call of Duty career, because I know he played CSGO afterwards, but in terms of Call of Duty, like if he was in this 18 plus era, that never happens. Like his greatest moments never happen in Call of Duty, and who knows how different his life would have been um, afterwards. So I think that's a pretty. I hope it happens. I hope we get a change. But yeah, like you, I do not expect it to come down. Another player that was pretty young. I don't know exactly how young he was when he started competing, but I know that he had
Wasn't
the.
18.
Yeah, he certainly was not. He did not
Yep, he was
sound
on
18.
he was on the cursed youth team when he
Oh
did
yeah,
that. You can't wallbang that attach.
yeah. Yeah, Tatch, also he announced this yesterday. So iLLeY announced it over the weekend or a little bit before the weekend. And Attach announced this yesterday on Memorial Day. Attach announced his retirement from Call of Duty. He just I'll read out his Twitter post. After 11 years of professional Call of Duty, it's my time to hang the jersey up. The first moment I played this game, I instantly fell in love. Once I learned about game battles and competitive COD, it was my dream to become a professional player. The fact that I was able to live out my childhood dream and meet so many amazing people along the way will be something I cherish for life. Thank you to my parents for the support throughout the years, all my teammates, and especially the ones I was able to make history with. I will forever be grateful for all the organizations that let me represent them throughout the years, but especially FaZe and Rocker, where I spent the most time during my career. Most importantly, thank you to all of the Call of Duty fans for showing up year after year and supporting the competitive scene to make this dream a reality. Without you, none of this is possible. I had the honor of winning a world championship and earning multiple pieces of the pie throughout the years. Now I'm ready to take a leap of faith and embrace new challenges as I move into the next chapter of my journey. Thank you for everything, Attach. One thing that popped out to me, not the big point, when he said throughout the years, but especially FaZe and Rocker, where I spent the most time during my career, that blew me away that he spent the most time with the Minnesota Rocker. I don't debate that. I'm sure he looked it up before he said it, but that just seemed crazy to me when he did mention that. The biggest point is also we were talking about Attach because he even more so that iLLeY was active this season. He was in the CDL. He signed with the C9 Cloud9 New York, and he was benched before these major four qualifiers. I think we were kind of thinking, okay, where does Attach go next? If that is, the path he took, and it's not the path that he took. He decided to retire. I know that he already announced I believe a 24-hour live stream. So that always made sense. Like even more than most players, Attach has been very popular, very well liked by other players and certainly by fans. And it always made sense that he would go into streaming and content creation as more of a full-time endeavor after he retired. Your thoughts on Attach's retirement from competitive Call of Duty?
Yeah, this is. I was trying to, the reason I mostly wanted to talk about it and combining iLLeY and Attach here at the start of this show was, as much as I said, like I could see iLLeY doing streaming going forward, I think that's even more of a natural fit for Attach. I could honestly see him do more content creation and YouTube like videos and stuff over streaming. I mean, obviously you can do both.
Mm-hmm.
But I just checked it. He's got 330,000 followers or subscribers on YouTube. And that's always been a huge talking point, especially for me on this show, but you even mentioned it over the years when we were trying to talk about like Attach potentially going to other teams and some of these other newer organizations and stuff entering the CDL. We always brought up how Attach you sign him or you want to build around him because he's not only a really good player, but he also brings that brand and the outside of the game stuff, especially in terms of the audience on YouTube and potentially Twitch if he keeps growing that. But yeah, I know, short trip down memory lane there with the wall bang spot in Ghosts. That was obviously one of um the youngest highlights from him, but in saying that too, he was the one thing saw constantly on Twitter yesterday was the youngest kid to ever win COD Champs, because I was back in the
Mm-hmm.
AW when it was in the in March or middle of the season instead of the end of the year. And I remember the stories that we've heard now of him then like doing the pep rally at his high school or whatever in his high school, knowing that, and just I couldn't even imagine being an 18-year-old or senior year of high school and just won $1 million tournament. And that would have been crazy. And let alone he's out in California, so probably a bigger high school and whatnot. But um yeah, I honestly, my initial reaction to reading his post in full was the exact same one that you just had in real time here. Stuck out to me when he was like, shout out FaZe and Rocker. Like FaZe is a no shit, but then Rocker, I was like, he really spent the most time. And then you look it up, like he's basically on Rocker for like 2-3 years. So kind of weird, but definitely was his longest tenured team in the CDL era, which just didn't seem right to me, but I guess it makes sense. Um, but yeah, Attach, another really good player. Another moment that will live in COD history. I saw the clip. I might have saw it today actually too, when he does um the round 11 1v3 against Optic in World War II, where he runs through the artillery barrage or whatever, and literally like you know the way that streak worked in MW or in World War II. I can't remember if I said MW2 or World War II at the start, but World War II, the way that streak works was kind of random, like where the bombardments were dropping, whatever. So he's literally flipping a coin by doing that play, and he just like YOLO sends it through, and he very easily could have just killed himself with the streak, and then that's a clip that nobody ever thinks about again. But because he runs through it, gets a 2-piece in the back, and then a 1v1 versus Chem 6 after that, like, and FaZe wins that map, and they win the whole tournament. I think it was like the stage 2 playoffs or something in World War II. I don't remember the tournament, but it was one of those playoff events for like the pro league. Could sit here all day and talk about, you know, individual moments and stuff from Attach over the years, but he was just always a really good guy. You know, as somebody who was regularly competing at a time when we were attending events for, uh, you know, work and whatnot. Like he was one of those players, at least in my experience, who was super easy to talk to. He was always willing to do an interview, and it wasn't one of those players who was like pulling teeth to try and get an answer from. Like he's just a really likable kid, and you know, he was great to talk to, great player on the map, and I think he's like, you know, he's in a really good spot now moving forward in terms of like setting himself up. We've talked about this um numerous times over the years, really, on the podcast, where other players, like, they end up retiring, and they don't have like that YouTube or the streaming stuff to fall back on because they focused on competing at the time. But obviously, Attach, like you said, one of those older players at this point now, kind of from that last generation in terms of doing the vlogs and stuff back in the day, building up that audience. And I this should be a very natural fit for him to do content creation and streaming. I could very easily see him also becoming a part of the flank if that is an option, just because of that, you know, the duo and the friendship he built with Zuma when he was playing in all those years. I could, he would be like a seamless addition to the flank. Or he could do his own thing. He had a podcast. It was like the Attachments. That might be what he calls his subscribers. He was doing some podcast stuff too on his YouTube at one point. But yeah, regardless, I think, you know, I could also see maybe like FaZe. I guess Optic is always an option realistically, but obviously
Yeah.
due to his history, I could see him doing like content stuff for FaZe. So he's definitely a guy I'm not worried about what comes next for him. He's, you know, set himself up nicely, all things considered. I do think these last couple of years were probably a little tough, just in terms of like placements and the teams he was
Hmm.
on, and lack of success, especially compared to some of his previous seasons. But a lot of things that people will remember Attached for: being a winner, being a good teammate, being just, you know, a good guy and easy to talk to, all that stuff. So um, yeah, wishing Attach the best going forward. Excited to see what he does next. And I think big picture, like you kind of said at the start, like he really is one of those last players from like the pre CWL era, or like however you want to phrase
Like
it,
the
like
MLG
the
era.
sure, like it's basically Slasher and TJ now.
Mm.
You can maybe lump Fellow in because Fellow was kind of coming up at that point, but even someone like Arcides, has got to be one of the older players in the league now. He came up in IW, so um, those number of guys who were around when you and I were, you know, much younger, and just falling in love with competitive Call of Duty, that number of players still remaining to this day is dwindling.
Yeah, I think we talked about it earlier this season that uh, I think I asked you like who is the oldest or second oldest player in the league, and I want to say that Slasher is the oldest, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, which would make sense, um, because he's been around, you know, just as long as Attached, maybe a little bit longer, and he. I think he even went to college, and then, you know,
Yep.
he's like one of those rare Call of Duty graduates as well. But I believe that Attach was the second oldest player following Clayster's retirement. So that kind of, you know, pointed out like there aren't that many of them still left that, you know, played around the time of like the first champs, or, you know, in the MLG era, where, you know, it was the MLG Pro League before the CWL and everything. So yeah, it is a kind of a like an end of an era for a lot of these players. But yeah, I was just like, I don't know if it's just me or if other people do this, but I tend to think about like, of course, the players' best moments or these like most memorable moments of their careers as they retire. But I also think about like the what ifs and the hypotheticals of their careers as well, because we talked about it at the time, but Attach was rumored to be joining Optic Texas, I believe 2 seasons ago, before he went to Vegas, I think it was, maybe. Or no, it might have been Vegas actually, because that might have been before Pred and Kenny joined the team. Because I don't know if it was like a guarantee that they were both going to join.
I think it might have been the year before. There was rumors of Cammy going to Optic and a
Yeah.
Tat and maybe even Clean. I can't remember at that time. There was a lot of rumors, but I feel like it wasn't last year. It might have been 2 years ago because that was when um I don't even know if this is technically right, but obviously there was that like Attach got benched towards the end of one year, but I don't remember if that was his last year on Minnesota or like he returned to Minnesota and played again for them. I'm getting my timeline mixed up in my head here.
Yeah, so he was with Minnesota until so he got benched at the end of the 22 season, and then he came back and played another year with Minnesota and then went to Vegas. So I think it was that it was 22. I think at that point it was like, will he go back to Minnesota or will he decide to uh Optic was like one of the biggest rumors at that time. So I think about something like that where it's like, okay, what happens if he does end up on Optic? Like how different is not only his career but competitive Call of Duty in general, now that we think about like Optic winning champs last season, the kind of the drama around like Scump retiring and the Dashy Rambo stuff, like how different does that make it? I also think about like the fact that with FaZe he was there for more than 4 years and they were incredible, and yet they didn't win a championship or they didn't win champs during that time. Like how different could things have gone in that direction of like if FaZe had been able to win those championships, or win a champs during their run with Clay and everything, because Clay, immediately after, or I guess not immediately, that's overvaluing it, but Clay after leaving FaZe won champs twice actually, and had a ton of success with E United. And it's kind of a shame that Attach didn't have that because his prime was extended, where he wins champs like you mentioned, like right after he turned 18. I looked it up. He was born in January of 97, I want to say. And then they win in March of 2015. So he was 18 years old in 2 months. So he has like this biggest moment of his career at 18 years old. And then he's always trying to chase that for the rest of his career. And I think that's a really interesting idea, really. And it's, honestly very similar to iLLeY. He wins it. I don't know if he's 18 or 19, but that was his rookie year, the first year he was allowed to compete in the CDL, and he wins it. And then it's all about trying to chase that again and trying to have that moment at least one more time. And for Attach, he had this real long prime where he goes from 2015 when he wins champs. He's with FaZe until 2019, I believe, the end of the 2019 season. And he was like an all-star level player in like 2022 or maybe even 2023. I can't remember the exact year, but I remember talking about it because Minnesota at the time was not very good. Like as a team, they were kind of mediocre or maybe a little competitive at times, but certainly not a true championship contender. And yet Attach had the best stats, I think, of like any player in the league. It was thought of like he is one of the best players in the league and that he is by far the best player on that team. So I think it's really impressive that he was able to have this kind of career, and have the success that he did for as long as he did, because he even won a major with Minnesota, of course, the Minnesota Miracle, which is like another great moment, an iconic moment in Call of Duty history that probably would never happen again if I had to imagine, the way that it happened. Especially that was a best of 9, I want to say, series. I thought it was a
It was 04. It was 04.
yeah. So right now, like unless these majors or like a minor or something goes back to that best of 9 format, we're not going to have to that extent that kind of comeback. So yeah, I think Attach, his career is awesome. I think he's probably gonna, if I had to guess, like he's gonna be one of the most successful recent Call of Duty players to or Call of Duty personalities to have success outside of it. It actually used to be a real great pipeline, to be honest, because Fwiz was like the head of like YouTube at one point after leaving Call of Duty. Of course, Courage has had a ton of success with streaming and YouTube. There have been a bunch of like former COD players or former like COD streamers that have gone on to have a ton of success, and I believe that Attach will too. And especially if he links up with Optic or FaZe or has that kind of connection with these orgs that he does have some kind of history with or some kind of connection with outside of the game as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Attach does in his post Call of Duty career. Do you want to talk about the major now? We've talked about Attach and iLLeY for about 40 minutes. Like I said at the top of the show, we will cover the major probably over multiple episodes, but we'll start at the very, very top. The Los Angeles Thieves, a team that we knew coming in, they were one of the 3 favorites to win this event. You went with FaZe as your team to win this event, but you knew that it might be, or was it the opposite?
I hedged my bet in the pick'em. I picked LAT heading into the event, so I'm 4 for 4 pre-event picking it, and then we got to the grand finals. I'm like, I'm gonna take FaZe because then I'm right either way.
Man, I thought it was the opposite. I was thinking like
I was also several drinks deep at the time of you or whenever I texted for that pick, and I was just like, yeah, screw it.
nah, man, I thought I got one major right. But either way, like this, we I don't know if have either of us picked outside of FaZe or Thieves at all this season for the major. Maybe the first one I think I might have picked Optic.
No. You picked Thieves.
Okay, so
yeah.
So we've gotten 4 majors through. One of us has picked LAT, one of us has picked FaZe this entire season for all 4 of these majors, and unfortunately, I have not been correct, I guess, at any of these guesses, and you have been correct in all 4 of these guesses. But that's because one of these 2 teams won every single major so far this season, or not so far, at all this season. Atlanta won the first 2 majors. LAT now win Major 3 and Major 4. And probably the most important thing, especially going into Champs, they proved that they can actually beat Atlanta FaZe. That was something that we had talked about going into this tournament. We talked about it on the preview episode, how the Thieves won the very first matchup between the 2 teams this season, which was back in December. So it was so long ago. It was an online match. FaZe, of course, started off very poorly to begin the season, and then they did not play, or they played at Major 1, I believe, and no, was it Major 1 or Major 2? I can't remember. Atlanta and LAT. So Major 1, they have the classic best of 7 series. Atlanta wins, and they don't really play for a while. I think it was over 3 months they went without playing each other. They played the most recent qualifiers. LAT loses that matchup, and I think that is where a lot of the doubt, if you think, okay, LAT's not going to win, the doubt comes from, are they going to be able to beat FaZe when it matters? Granted, it took a weird route. I did not expect this route for the Thieves and how they did it, where they have to drop down to the losers bracket and win 3 straight matches to even get a chance to play Atlanta FaZe. But they do that, and they beat FaZe 4-2 in the best of 7 grand finals, which was a little dicey because when FaZe LAT wins those first 2 maps, and you're like, oh man, like they're heating up. They have so much momentum going into this, and then FaZe wins the next 2 maps, ties the series up. It basically becomes a best 2 out of 4 or whatever, or best 2 out of 3. And I'm thinking, okay, FaZe has got this now. Like LAT, they kind of blow this lead. FaZe is FaZe. We've seen this multiple times over multiple years. They're just going to win this. And LAT buckled up and they win the final two maps of the series. They win their second major of the season. One of the big points that obviously is not like the biggest or whatever, but to me it seems significant. They become the first team in CDL history, aside from Atlanta FaZe, to finish the regular season with the number one seed. And they do it by beating FaZe in the grand finals of a LAN event. All of that seems significant to me. How significant of a win is this for LA Thieves, especially heading into the biggest event of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. I'm gonna avoid speaking too much in terms of the specifics of the games and the series, especially on Sunday because I didn't really get to watch any of those outside of like the clips I saw on Twitter and stuff at the end of certain maps here and there. Um, but big picture stuff like you said. Now, FaZe with 2 championships, these with 2 championships. I spoke about it on the preview show. Is that sets up the champs as essentially like winner take all. If either of those teams wins champs, and obviously there's EWC after it, so that's a little weird, in terms of this narrative at least. But like in the eyes of a lot of people, I feel whoever wins champs, if it is FaZe or if it is LAT, that they will be looked at as the best team in Black Ops 6 for the 2025 CDL season. Um, I do think another thing we kind of been talking about in recent weeks is like those end of season awards, and I believe Scrap won MVP for Major Four, which would give him 2 individual uh, major MVPs for Major 3 and 4 with the 2 championships to tie the FaZe guys. In my eyes, at least, that essentially locks Scrap in as the MVP for the season because the voting will take place before champs. So, like he's got the credentials basically now with this. Like you look at guys like Simp and Celium, who we talked about when we were doing this. He has the same number of championships as them, but he has an additional tournament MVP for this season. So, that's big in that regard. And Scrap will, if he does win MVP, will probably give a pretty legendary interview where he basically just tells everyone exactly what he thinks they can do and where they should go, and maybe some birds are flying and whatnot. But yeah, in all seriousness, I think um, this win by LAT sets up the best narrative in terms of like trying to claim who the best team of the season will be, because like let's just say FaZe won this event, they would have 3 titles, and LAT has one, and then we go to champs and LA Thieves win champs. Then people are like, well, yeah, LAT won champs, but they have less titles than FaZe. Who was the best team? Yada yada. Like, no, both of them are at 2 now. If one of them wins champs, then that like definitively in my eyes at least says like they were the whichever team wins champs plus the 2 championships, if it's FaZe and Atlanta, they should be looked at in my opinion as the best team of the year. um so yeah, but I do think just looking at like the scores here for the grand finals in particular, kind of you wrote it down here. LAT went 2-0 in the S&Ds. um that's obviously a big talking point on the Ego Chall podcast when we're always talking about these the tournament play and whatnot. S&D wins championships, and that comes through here again. But that is a little, you look at the last time these teams squared off in grand finals at Major One, Atlanta was able to do it by winning the S&Ds. On the other hand, though, we've talked about LAT in control all season, and the fact that Atlanta was able to win a control after losing the first 2 maps of the grand finals is a little interesting to me. I, again, didn't watch that map, so not sure exactly what went down there, but um, that's kind of, not to say like it's a flip flop in terms of LAT becoming the better S&D team and Atlanta becoming the better control team, because I doubt that. I don't really think that's true. But it is, as we get later in the season, seeing these teams like trading blows in the mode that the other team is supposed to be, well known for, and to an extent, that is something we'll have to keep an eye on at Champs, because let's just say that trend continues going into Champs, and LAT is not only beating other teams in the respawns, but they're beating FaZe and the S&Ds too. Does that set them up to win it all? Conversely, if Atlanta, who we know are a good search team, is able to look really strong on the hard points and take respawns off of Atlanta, or off of LAT, does that set Atlanta up to, clinch champs? So, um, really, all things considered here, from a very like big picture narrative breakdown, at least, I do think this result at Major Four sets us up for a very meaningful champs. Obviously, champs is meaningful on its own, but just in terms of answering that question that, I feel like a lot of community people like to debate and whatnot over the years, and I know we talk about it um, over the years too, and just in answering that question of who is the best team in X year, we should get that answer based on at the end of champs. And I guess technically, let's just say LAT wins champs, FaZe wins EWC again. Maybe that, starts another conversation there, because then they're both at 3 championships, but LAT has the champs rings. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, though.
Entering this event, LAT were 1-4 against FaZe this season. In S&D, they were 3-6. Granted, they did win a game 5. I think they won that. Maybe they won that S&D as well in that first series of the year. So at least one, maybe two of those S&D wins came from 6 months ago now. But I think it's interesting to see what maps that they won or lost in those matches, and then what they decided to go with in this grand finals. Because so red card was the common one, at least in S&D. They win the red card S&D in this grand finals, and they were 1-1 against FaZe on red card S&D in those previous 5 matches. That was the only S&D map that they had an even or winning record on against FaZe, which I think is pretty interesting. They were 0-1 on Dealership, 1-2 on Skyline, 1-2 on Vault, and they obviously did not play any of those maps when they got to the grand finals. I don't know. I forget what the 7th and final map would have been had they gone to game 7. But either way, like FaZe was not able to win red card in this case, and that seemed to be kind of obviously a major factor in LAT winning. And then if you look at some of the hardpoint maps, which obviously LAT has been an incredible. I would say LAT has probably the highest like map win percentage in like every game mode pretty much like all season. I'd have to look it up specifically, but when I was pulling the stats for our Major 4 preview, they had like a nearly 70% win percentage in just about every game mode. And like I know for sure that most of these teams do not, which just kind of goes to show like how dominant LAT has been pretty much this entire season. So I just looked it up. Hardpoint, LAT has the highest hardpoint win percentage, 67%. S&D, Atlanta has the highest, 65.5 versus LAT, which is 64.5. And then in control, like you mentioned, LAT has been by far the best control team in terms of record. They've won 82% of their controls this season, where Atlanta has won 68%. But then you look at how that has borne out in these matches, and now it's 3-5. LAT is 3-5 in control against Atlanta. And I really like that is shocking to me that like you think about it, like they've won 82% of their controls and 5 losses have come to Atlanta FaZe. I don't know how many losses, comprises like 82% win percentage. I would say that it's most of those losses in control are probably against Atlanta FaZe.
Well, we can tell you, because you just got to go to because there's only one control in each
Yeah, I know how
series.
many
So,
matches they played.
well, that's I'm going to the standings right now.
But yeah, like that's.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
God. Did you hear that?
Yeah, Siri was trying to get on the action too.
So LAT is 37-11, so that's 48 series this year, so it should be 48 control maps. So we do so 43 divided by 48
Well, you probably look
would
on
be
Breaking Point too.
89%, so it's got to be 40 divided by 48.
Yeah. So they played
83%, so it's 39 or 40 control wins.
Yeah, so I looked on Breaking Point, and they said 42-9 is their overall control record. So they're whatever that is, like 39-4 against everybody else.
Because the grand finals obviously is multiple controls, so that was fake news on my part, just doing the standings.
Yeah,
so it makes sense.
So they're whatever 3-5 against FaZe and control, and then like 39-4 against every other team in the CDL. So that goes to show like how tough FaZe has been, and I think that's what makes it even more impressive that they were still able to pull off this win, and that's taking into account them losing a control map protocol, which was game 3, which kind of started that little mini comeback that FaZe had. LAT also lost the Skyline Hardpoint 250 to 235. Again, like for lesser teams, that is a loss that will tilt you. Something that I always remembered from like E United, and why I was so surprised that they were able to kind of get over the hump back in Black Ops 4 was they were a team that if they lost a map or two, it seemed like it just spiraled out of control at that point, that they weren't able to turn it around and win after, dropping a map maybe they shouldn't have. And lesser teams, like I said, would lose this kind of series where you win the first 2 maps, you feel good about yourself, especially a team that you haven't been able to beat in a really long time. The only team that has really consistently given LAT troubles, and they lose those 2 maps, both of them very close, a 3-2 control and a 250 to 235 hard point. Teams would be like, all right, like we're like, screw you, like you're doing this wrong, like what the hell are we doing? And they break down over the course of a best of 7 series. LAT is able to, kind of rally together essentially in this moment. They play Red Card S&D, which is map 5, a critical map 5, especially in search. We talked about it before Major 3, but Atlanta had won up to Major 3, and obviously they didn't have the performance that they certainly expected. But coming into that event, FaZe were winning 92% of their S&D maps on LAN, and obviously they're the best S&D team in terms of win percentage for the entire season. So that gives you an idea of like, okay, they really need to win this map, and LAT wins 6-3, and they're able to kind of, whatever maybe doubts were, maybe, I don't know, maybe they were never creeping in for this kind of team, but all that momentum that FaZe had built up through those final second wins in maps 3 and 4 kind of disappear, and LAT just win 3-0 Hacienda control in game 6 to win the major and to kind of get rid of that narrative that they can't beat FaZe. I still think that I'd really like to see this matchup again at Champs and potentially in a Champs Grand Finals, because these are, like you said, the 2 best teams. There is no other debate about who is the best team in 2025 in Black Ops 6. These are the 2 best. Regardless of what happens at Champs, if either of these 2 teams or both of them just flame out, like it does not matter. These are the 2 best, and we should recognize that before we get to this event, where I think a lot of times Champs will dictate almost like after the fact. People will say, well, this team was the best because they won Champs, and that's just not how it works. Like a lot of these teams will have pretty dominant runs over a 5 to 6 month period, and then at the biggest event of the year, they just don't have it. I mean, Optic was the biggest example of this for a long time, where the dynasty was made through those lesser events. Like they weren't able to get it done at Champs for years and years, and that was always the knock on them, is like, yeah, you can win like a MLG Anaheim, or you can win at these big events, but until you get to champs, and then it kind of all falls apart. We'll see what happens, obviously, at champs with these two teams. Again, I would love to see them match up for, I believe, a sixth time, maybe even a seventh time. I'm cool with them, playing in like winners finals and then it being, running it back at grand finals. But I guess you kind of mentioned it, but is Scrap definitively your MVP now that he's won back to back major? I guess is that a finals MVP or did they just give it for the entire
It's
tournament?
tournament MVP. I'm pretty sure. I think the only one they do finals for is champs.
Yeah. So is he definitively MVP in your mind now?
I think he has to be. I mean, I said beforehand, Celium would be, and I would have to look at the actual individual statistics and the KDs, but I'm pretty sure both of them are like top 5 in KD, so I don't think the difference would be that big enough to the point where I would say like Celium has an edge over Scrap, but Celium and Scrap both have 2 championships. Scrap's got 2 tournament MVPs this year. Celium has 1. So I feel like the accolades just, you give it to Scrap. And the other, I don't know if I said it this time, but the recency of Scrap's performances and LAT's championships in comparison to FaZe winning earlier in the year, that could sway voters into, leaning towards Scrap and LA Thieves over someone from FaZe. So yeah, if I was voting today without actually looking at the KDs and whatnot, I feel like it's got to go to Scrap at this point.
And it should be really noted that they did not have a usual path for major grand finals champions. They win, against Vancouver Surge, 3-0 sweep of Vancouver, and we'll probably talk about them in the next episode because that was just like ridiculous. So LAT wins that first round matchup. They play Miami in the winner semis. We both pick LAT, of course, because LAT, you won major 3. They look really good. At that time, it was like, all right, like, we still think Vancouver is kind of on the up and up, and LAT just smoked them. Miami beats them in game 5. I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but after game 5, you get the Super and Scrap altercation. We haven't seen an altercation like this in a while. God bless Scrap. Like he is just like a magnet for this kind of stuff. So they have this on stage altercation, get face to face. Then LAT go on this loser bracket run. They beat Toronto, they beat Optic, they beat Miami, they 3-0 Miami, and then the whole gang pretty much gets up and basically shake hands with Super. And I thought that was really funny that like the whole team was right there to kind of let Super know a little bit, like maybe sit back down. And then they get into the grand finals, of course, and they win and they beat Atlanta FaZe. What do you think about LAT's run in general? That loss to Miami was baffling. I could not believe that they lost it, especially in a game 5. Like going to game 5, even with how great Miami has been in search and destroy, I just kind of expected it to happen for LAT, and especially because LAT had won 6-2 in that first S&D in the series. So I was like, oh, okay, like, whatever. Like, it is surprising that Miami was able to take 2 hard points or whatever, but I still believed because LAT was able to win that first search that they would just do it again in the second. What did you think about their run in total?
Yeah, I missed out on both of their matches between Thieves and Miami, but obviously I saw the clip of the end of Miami's victory over Thieves. I was gonna say I wondered how Thieves reacted after getting their revenge in the losers bracket, but you summed it up there. So I think that's the to be resilient enough to lose to that team and then go on a loser bracket run where you have to beat multiple other solid teams to even get a shot at a rematch, and then let alone reverse the fortunes and actually beat them. You talk about momentum and all that stuff with the way tournaments go nowadays in terms of playing consecutive matches and whatnot. Maybe that played a factor here in phases, or sorry, in LAT's advantage. But you got to think they were a little more fired up to get the rematch with Miami after what happened the first time they played. So that it is, it's not like this is a one-off thing because Miami did beat Thieves too in the online qualifiers, but there's just something different about, Miami being able to do it on LAN as well. Kind of, if anyone was doubting this Miami squad or thinking that win in these Major Four qualifiers online was a fluke, like kind of Miami like showed what they're capable of here at this event. Um, but yeah, in terms of LAT getting the job done, it is, they had to do it the hard way in terms of getting back to the rematch and getting to the finals. But one of those other things we talked about, the last two events after Major One, where we saw FaZe and LAT play twice, kind of eluded us these last two majors at Major 2 and Major 3, the matchup there. And when you see like LAT getting a rematch with Miami after Miami already beat LAT, it would have been pretty easy to think like, oh, Miami beats them again, and then we don't see LAT versus Atlanta again. That would have sucked. Obviously, I say that sucks from like a general COD perspective. Miami fans would have been thrilled to be in the finals, and I would have been happy for them too. But end of the day, we wanted to see a lot of people wanted to see another showdown between Atlanta and Thieves, and we got our wish with the way things worked out. So I think it is. Maybe it's another testament to this LAT team and just how strong they are, and something I didn't even get to say. I know I said it in our Major 3 recap, but I set the bar high for this LAT team, and I've said it numerous times over this year that the minimum expectation for LATs was titles with an S, titles plural, however it was. And I said after Major 3, they got that first one, but I need more for them, especially after all we heard this offseason, everything of the money being thrown into this team, Nadeshot taking a pay cut, yada, yada. Now they've gotten those 2 championships, and they still want more, but like that was the bar was set very high, in my opinion, when you're throwing out this term super team. And it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen right away to start this year. But LAT, if anyone was doubting, is this squad actually a super team? They've gone back to back now, looking like the favorites heading in the champs. I think the answer to that question is a resounding yes, they are a super team.
How I view great teams is, of course, obviously the heights that you can get to and winning these championships, but it is overcoming the adversity that you have to do to actually get to the championship, to get to that point. And losing to Miami, while it is like you can say they're kind of making their own adversity because of these little mistakes that add up here and there, and that's why they might lose a series to the Heretics. But it's still overcoming that adversity, still having to win. FaZe had to win 3 matches to get to this point, or had to play 3 matches to get to this point. LAT had to play 5 to get to the same point that they played Atlanta. So that is the adversity that I'm talking about. And even if it could just be one map, pulling out, if you're down 5-4 and winning those final 2 rounds, like it might seem simple on the surface, but obviously a lot of great teams, or a lot of teams that we believe to be great, aren't able to rise to that moment and rise to the occasion and win in that moment. And LAT were able to do that. On the other hand, there are going to continue to be questions about Atlanta FaZe. And I've already seen, there was some kind of meme about like Silver Springs or something, like a sign for Silver Springs. And there was like, how did they already get a sign up for Atlanta FaZe? So there are going to be those questions. And it's because Atlanta I don't know how many times they've done it. But obviously they have made a habit of making it to Championship Sunday. Again, what I would consider to be an accomplishment and an achievement by itself. But they made a habit of getting to that moment, but not always, or even I think they have technically a losing record on Championship Sunday, or especially in the grand finals. They lose the grand finals to LAT, a team that we've talked about. They were 4-1 against the season, had a 4-match win streak, including that major one grand finals victory, including the most recent qualifiers. So where does FaZe go from here? Obviously, now the focus goes entirely on champs, but what do you make of this Silver Surfer argument, or this moniker that has now come up again despite winning those first two majors, despite having won EWC? What do you think about that Silver Surfer label being put back on Atlanta FaZe after this most recent major grand finals loss?
I'm not gonna, really give it the time of day. We've talked about it at several points at this, at this point now. Just like, only one team can win the event. Same thing, football. Only one team can win the Super Bowl. So there's always going to be that team that loses in the Super Bowl. World Series, NBA championship, whatever it is in real sports. There's only one team that can win it all at the end of the day. With all these tournaments, there's only one team that can hoist the trophy. And the fact that FaZe is just so good at getting to the finals, and there have been those points where these stretches have been longer and there have been without championships, but they had the championships this year too. So it's just, I forget, did they get sixth place at Major 3? I know Major 3 was their worst place.
Something like that, yeah.
But first, whatever, sixth we'll say, and second, they've been to 3 grand finals this year, 2-1 record in them. Technically, they were at the grand finals of Minor 1, so 4-1 record in grand finals if you want to or 3-1 if you really want to get even more specific. But yeah, I just think, kind of touched on it earlier with like the way the series broke down in the grand finals. At least the fact that Thieves was winning the searches raised an eyebrow for me. So I'd like to see how FaZe is going to address that. Maybe it's something in the vetoes going forward, or maybe it's just more work. I actually just saw, on the timeline when I was just looking now, TJ just posted like Ego Chall with Gwen 3 minutes ago, and Carolina is a whole different story. It'd be very easy with the way things have gone for Carolina for them to kind of just like pack it in and just show up to champs and do what they do and most likely get a top 8 finish there. But we touched on at the beginning now that there's basically a month until champ starts, and the teams that put in the work over this next month, that could be the difference, especially when we're looking at teams like Thieves and FaZe. They both have the same number of championships now. If one of those teams gets a little complacent and the other grinds a little harder, maybe that gives them an edge in a potential rematch at champs. Not saying that's going to be the case. I could very easily see both of those teams going really hard over this next month and just elevating the gameplay we see at a potential rematch even further. But this is one like FaZe we talk about over the years where they're usually in a position where they have their map pool really ironed out, and they towards the end of the regular season are testing out some of the new maps being thrown in. And it's like I remember it would have been MW2 with sub base or whatever. They were like not good at sub base at all, and they just like kept playing it in the online qualifiers and lost it. And then I think like they eventually just kept playing it and got better at it. And no, it would have been MW3 with sub base. So last year, I don't know. Regardless, I remember that was a thing. And they weren't good at sub base. They kept on playing it and losing it in the qualifiers when they built up a lead towards the end of the season in CDL points. And then they got better at it. And we, without actually looking at the map records in front of me right now, I don't have the data to support what I'm about to say in that regard. But I feel like that's just not the necessarily the case with Thieves this year. Like they still could do some more work to get really, really good at some of these maps, but it's also been a different game in terms of the map pool in general. And we had rewind at the start of the year, then we didn't have rewind, so it might just not be even worth talking about. Maybe it's just a moot point. But end of the day, I do think FaZe has the work ethic as a squad. If they really put their head down and grind over this next month, they could, very quickly distinguish or get rid of the whatever the Silver Surfer memes just by winning champs again.
Yeah, so
It's gonna be tough.
they lost 3 S&D maps at Major 4. They lost S&D to Cloud9 and won all the respawns. They beat Optic and Miami in Search, which again, Miami coming into this, I believe they were 16-3 in S&D with Super in the lineup, I believe. So I think they had the best S&D record of any team coming into this, at least over that time period. Either way, like they were a very good Search team. Like, they even beat LAT in a game 5 to knock them into losers bracket. So, and I think it's, I guess it's concerning in a way of like, Optic was concerning for most of the season because it was like, why are they that bad? With FaZe, it's like, obviously, like it's a different level. Like it's about winning championships for them. It is solely about winning championships. In that case, like you had the expectation for LAT to win multiple championships this season, to win multiple tournaments. For FaZe, I think it is largely the same kind of expectation every year. It's like you should be winning more than one major, or if you're going to win one major, you better win champs as well. Like there is that kind of expectation for FaZe year after year. And in those 2 matches, C9 and LAT, the grand finals, they lost 3 S&D maps, all 3 of the S&D maps in those series, and they were on 3 different maps: 1 dealership, 1 red card, 1 rewind. And I was just looking it up for this entire season. That was the 5th time that they played dealership S&D. That was the 16th or the 15th time that they played rewind, I believe, or excuse me, the 15th time they played red card, and then the 4th time that they played rewind. So I think that's interesting. I'm sure it's the vetoes and just how it goes with LAT. LAT is not going to give them like a map like Protocol, for example, like 11-4. That's their best game or best map by far. Or even like they've been pretty good on some of these other maps as well. But like LAT is not going to give FaZe like these gimme maps, especially in Search. But I think it's interesting that they don't have a lot of experience with these 2 maps in particular, dealership and rewind. Red card is maybe a different set of circumstances. The fact that they lost that map, that was also the game 5 map, if I'm not mistaken, where the tide turned essentially. LAT win that map, and then they 3-0 FaZe on control in the final map of the series. So I think there could be something with that. I'm sure FaZe will look back at that series and really start to break it down of like, okay, where did it go wrong for us? Why did we lose to C9 in Surge? Why did we, I think they lost to C9 in the qualifiers as well. Why did we lose to FaZe in these 2 S&D maps? And I'm sure they'll come back and they'll be even stronger than they were going into this event. But I mean, I think, like you, it's unfair, the Silver Surfer thing. I don't think it, like like you said, there's only one team that can win. There are only 12 teams. These teams are, by and large, especially at the top, very concentrated in terms of talent. The fact that Optic Texas struggled so much this season was a shocker because they had so much talent on that team that it seemed almost implausible that they couldn't win matches, and in some cases couldn't win maps. For FaZe, it seems very plausible that a team like LAT, who we considered to be probably the most talented team on paper coming into this season, it's pretty plausible that they would lose in a best of 7 series to that kind of team. I think it was much more disappointing and much more of a shock that they ended up getting top 6 at Major 3. But teams have those events from now and there. Like even LAT did not perform up to their standard at Major 2, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of these top teams, like Vancouver, for the most recent example, did not perform up to the standard that I think they and many people thought they would coming into this event. So I think it's not to be expected, but it certainly is understandable when there is that kind of disappointment. It's when they get to, the grand finals or they get to Championship Sunday and they're not able to deliver. I think that kind of the focus on that is so weird to me, because if we're talking about traditional sports, if a team gets to the Super Bowl, or they get to the conference finals or whatever it is, like a step away, and they lose, but they win sometimes too. Like it's not like, they go like 0-10 or whatever. It's, sometimes like they go 4-6 or they go 5-5. I think that's pretty reasonable in a 12-team league, that you would come up, short, quite a few times in these big moments. So I maybe it's because it wasn't spread out as much, because they went, what was it, the MW2 season, like after Cold War, they dominate that season. Then the next year, I don't think they won an event. So I think that might have been where it really comes from, because I think it's unrealistic to think a team that won a major last year and won 2 majors this year, that that team is a Silver Surfer. Because would you not just say LAT is, kind of in the same boat as them? Like, they have the same number of grand finals, the same number of titles. Like, LAT is in pretty much the exact same position that FaZe is. It's just the opposite. Like, one team started with 2, one team finished with 2. I just think it's a kind of a ridiculous conversation. But I figured we'd have it because it is something that people are now talking about again after Major 4. And,
I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm someone like Simp and hearing this stuff, like, it could always be worse. I'd rather be getting second than top 8, the first 3 events back to back to start this year.
Yeah.
Or, God forbid, top 12, like a team like Vancouver. That's literally like Vancouver, Silver Surfer. They've got 2 grand finals appearances this year, 0-4 map count in both grand finals, and then a crazy, just out of nowhere top 12 finish at this event. Like, could be worse.
Yeah, they're not like an Iron Surfer. They're at the very bottom, getting rusty with a bunch of those. Like, I mean, I was about to say with like a team like Vegas, but they can't even say that now. So, but yeah, I think that's probably where we should leave it. Obviously, we're almost an hour and a half in, and we've only talked about 2 teams. So we will talk about most likely Miami and Optic, maybe even Vancouver. I do want to get to them sooner rather than later, because I think the longer that we go without talking about them, the less like it'll feel, I'll feel less strongly about it, I should say. So I think we'll talk about a few teams on the next show. Obviously, if anything comes up before then, we will talk about, I don't know if roster changes will happen, if maybe some guys will get released or whatever, but we will talk about it at that point. Before we get out of here, though, I should mention the Pick'em, because we're kind of like Ego Chall LAT FaZe, to be honest. I think you started off pretty well this season. I caught up a little bit. I gained a little bit of a lead late in the season, and you've caught up to me now. You went 14-4 at Major 4 in the Pick'em. I went 13-5. There was a 1 match difference coming into the event. So we're both 158 and 80 going into Champs. So Champs will decide. Yeah, so we're the 2 best Ego Chall Pick'em people this season. Whoever wins Champs will officially be the best.
Damn, it's crazy. Trem still has a 0% success rate in Ego Chall Pick'em.
I know, that's crazy. He's the less said about him, the better, I think, at this point.
I do, real quick before we get out of here, we'll obviously talk about this more, in the lead up to Champs, but I do want to say, like, the Champs race has concluded, and the 8 teams that will be at Champs this year: LAT 1 seed, FaZe 2 seed, Toronto 3 seed, Vancouver 4 seed, Miami 5th, Carolina 6th, Optic 7th, and Boston 8th. I think that's the biggest thing. Just Boston struggling at Major 4, and Optic did enough to jump them. And we'll talk about it when we're talking about some of these other teams. The way Minnesota played at this event, it got to the point where, like, if Minnesota was going to go on this miracle run to make it to Champs, it wasn't going to be at the expense of Optic. It potentially was going to be at the expense of Boston. I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, just wanted to set the stage there. We're going to talk plenty about Champs and all that, but based on the teams I just read and all that, you can work out. They've already posted the bracket for Champs for the first round. So 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. You can work all that out. We'll talk about it more over this week's, but I just wanted to set the base level there and say I did think at a very surface level it was interesting that Minnesota made it a little close towards the end, but it wasn't going to be at the expense of Optic. It potentially could have been at Boston, and I thought that was an interesting wrinkle in all this.
Yeah, I mean, Optic, they jump into 7th, and then it's like maybe we should have stayed in 8th, because I think at least the trend that they've had with Atlanta FaZe is not very positive and not very encouraging. I would feel a little bit better with just less like fewer matches to deal with, or fewer losses to deal with LAT. But either way, it was going to be a tough road ahead for them. I wonder if like Boston's like, obviously they don't feel good or anything, but Atlanta FaZe has pretty much crushed them most of the times that they played them. And at least Boston's like, well, we beat LAT on LAN already this season. So that's like something to feel pretty good about going into a tough matchup for them. But yeah, we'll talk about more with the champ stuff. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it's a month away when champ starts. So we have, almost half a dozen or more shows before then, before champ starts. We're going to talk about this major probably over the next week or so. We're going to have to talk about the All-Star team, because the All-Star voting for the CDL was opened, I think, either today or yesterday. So the voting's just opened up. Obviously, we talked about it last year. We gave our picks for the All-Star teams. We'll do that again. But we got a lot of stuff coming over the next 2 weeks that we hope you enjoy. Please like, subscribe, or follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just look up Ego Chall Podcast on YouTube. You can watch our live stream on YouTube or on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. You can also follow Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2Ks. Please follow us on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, as at Preston Byers, and the podcast Twitters at Ego Chall Podcast. And probably going to be coming back to you on Wednesday night. Do not know for sure what's going to be the schedule.
Tomorrow.
Wednesday is tomorrow. Yeah, maybe not Wednesday night. I'm not sure exactly. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a weird schedule with the wedding, a little bit weird schedule for me work-wise. So we'll figure it out. I would recommend, if you're unsure of when it's going to be, because we are technically unsure of when it's going to be, you should just subscribe to the podcast or to the YouTube channel or one of the podcast feeds. And then whenever it pops up, that's when you can listen or watch it. So that's how I would kind of treat it. But we will definitely have another show before the end of the week. We will talk about more of this major and whatever's happening in the Call of Duty esports space. That does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys for all the love and support. Shout out Jay Hearn and A2G Mercy in the YouTube chat for showing love. But yeah, like Preston said, regular season's done and dusted now. Still got more to talk about from this event. I'm gonna, over the next couple of days, I'm gonna watch all the matches I missed. So hopefully, if there's any, analytical stuff that I may have usually said from the games I watched, maybe I'll pick up on that and be able to talk about that in the episodes. But we got some good, good time to fill over the next couple of weeks before champs, and should have a bunch of good stuff to, fill that time with. So if you're interested in hearing us yet more about all things CDL, stay tuned. We'll be back, like Preston said, at some point before the end of this week, because we do have a lot more to talk about from the major. But yeah, other than that, thanks for showing love. Thanks for the support. And remember to send the chow.